Welcome back everyone. This is part 6 in our FPS tutorial series. So where we left off in part 5, we had just made it so that our character can move around and we can look with our mouse, and we also added some code in our Unarmed script to actually give us the ability to manipulate the player or the arm's position and rotation. So I used that to just adjust the rotation of our player when he runs, just to mimic that he's actually moving a little bit faster and something actually has changed when he starts to run. So a few things before we start this tutorial. I've added a directional light for a start. That's probably the first thing I should mention. I added this because I did notice that on YouTube the videos are a lot darker when I watch them on my phone, and that is because I actually have a 1440p monitor on my computer, so everything looks lighter on my computer, and then when I upload the videos they are a lot darker on YouTube. So I've just added a directional light so that you guys can see what's going on in the scene a bit better. One thing we'll do before I explain what's going on in the scene, I'll just right click in the hierarchy and create an empty game object and just call it level, and we'll just come up here to the transform, right click and then click on reset so that we zero out all the position and rotation, and then we can just use this as a empty folder basically. So we just grab the level parts, so got that, the pillars, the walls and the chandeliers. I think that's all. Just grab them in there. I may as well drag the directional light in there as well. Close that up just to neaten up the hierarchy so that you guys can see the new things I've actually added. So before I explain what I've added to this scene here, you'll need to go ahead for this tutorial and get some particle effects, and I've just got the Unity particle pack from the Unity store. It's free, so just go ahead and download, import that into Unity. There is one called Unity Particle Pack 5.x, I think, and that's the old one, so make sure that you get the newer version. This one was actually made for 2018.2.5 and higher. So make sure you get the Unity Particle Pack, this one here. Also, I just got some audio clips, so you can go ahead and get some audio clips if you would like. I've got one that I just called Folly, and basically this is just for when I throw a punch, like it's kind of like cloth moving. So very basic. And I just got some impact sounds for punching, so I got this one, and I got this one, and I got this one. Okay. Just some simple audio clips. You can get a few more than that if you would like. So yeah, you need some audio clips and you'll need the effect examples, which is, as I said, the Unity Particle Pack. Alright, so once you've gone ahead and got yourself those, you can actually add some game objects to your scene as well, like I have. You can see here I've got all of these game objects, and what these are going to represent is different surfaces that we can interact with in our game. So the first one here, the green one, I've just called an untagged surface. So anything that's not tagged in the game, that just has the default untagged, this is going to mimic that. So we're going to have a certain type of sound and particle effect play when we actually punch something that is untagged. And then I've got, excuse me, I've got the enemy, which is the red one. So you'll have to come up here and actually go ahead and add a new tag. Just press the plus button and yeah, just make sure you spell them exactly the same as me. Otherwise it's not going to work when we do our script. Okay, so I've got enemy. After you make the tag, make sure you come back here and then actually tag it as enemy. Okay, and the same as stone, go ahead, make a tag for stone, and then wood, make a tag for wood, water barrel, make the tag for water barrel, metal, and then we have just a capsule with a rigid body. So we're also going to, anything that has a rigid body attached to it, we're going to add force to it. So we can punch it and knock it around. So if we had an enemy that had ragdoll physics, for example, and had a rigid body, we could punch it and send him flying or something like that. Okay, so that's just going to mimic an enemy that has a rigid body, or any object that has a rigid body, I suppose. Like we could have boxes or barrels in our game, and you could go up and punch them and actually make them move, things like that. Okay, so yeah, that's basically all that is. So you can go ahead, as I said, make sure when you make the tags you actually assign the tag to each one. Okay, it's sounds simple, but it's very easy to forget to actually tag the object once you make the tag. All right, so if I go to our player, we can actually get rid of the player test script now. So just right click, remove component. We don't actually need that script anymore. And I think, yeah, I also changed the name of our arms, okay? Because it had some big, stupid, long name. So yeah, it had this name here. So I've basically just changed the name to arms unarmed, okay? Just to make it easier. So on our arms unarmed, you'll need to add 2 audio sources, okay? You've already got your animator from the last one. And then we're going to have this script here, the unarmed script. And there's quite a bit going on in this script. So what we're going to do before I go into the script and show you guys exactly what it is and how it works, we're going to actually add an empty game object to our arms. So just right click on the arms, go create empty, press F2 to rename it, and we'll call this Raypoint. Okay, and basically what this is, I'll just double click on that so we can see. Okay, so this is where we want our actual ray to come from. So when we punch, we're going to fire off a Raycast, but you could just have it coming from the main camera. That's fine. It would come from the middle of the screen or wherever our camera actually is. I think our camera is actually higher than the middle of the screen. Yeah, it's actually a little bit higher. But I actually want to be able to make the point of the Raycast customizable, basically, because I want it to be like where we actually punch. So for example, I'll move it up here, and this is our right arm, the one that actually punches. So I'll move it like somewhere like here, so that when we punch something and play the effects, it's going to be around the actual area that we actually punch. I mean, we don't want to punch something here and then have effect up here, you know what I mean? It'll look a bit silly. So you can adjust this after you actually see the effects being played out. So hang on a second, I'm just gonna have a drink. Yeah, so as I said, you can adjust this once we actually get the effects working. So another thing you'll notice here, if we open up our arms, we have all of our animations inside of our arms, and we can actually, if we want to, if you go into animations, you can actually call events from inside your animations. So just say we had a function we wanted to call, we could actually write the name of it and call it through animation like so. But to make it easier, I've actually just gone ahead. So if I just delete this for now, just go to your punch animation on your arms and then press Control D and duplicate it, and you'll notice that it automatically duplicates the animation, but it's no longer part of the arms anymore. Okay, it's just a normal animation here. So once you've duplicated the punch animation, go to the animator, find your punch animation, left click on that. yours will have the old punch in it, so just replace it with the new punch animation, okay? Very important that you do this, okay? So make sure, I know it's tempting just to skip ahead and get to the script and then, try to set everything up yourself, but you need to watch the whole video and let me explain how everything works so you understand how to set it up. It's just a lot better to do that rather than rushing forward and then ending up with errors and wondering why things don't work properly, okay? So yeah, replace the old punch animation with the new punch animation. And then you'll notice if you go to animation and we actually click on, or if you don't have the animation tab for a start, go to these three little dots here, go to add tab and select animation. And then you can actually left click on your arms up here and you'll notice that we have our animations here. And if we open this list, we've got the equip and it says read only, idle, read only. And then we have our punch animation and it's not read only, okay? This means that we can actually add an animation event to it. So if I go to the game screen up here and I move this slider up, you'll see that we can see the animation in our game view. So I know about here is where the player's actually fully extended his arm to punch. So this is where we would want to call our punching function that we're going to make, basically. So we can actually call the function and shoot the raycast at the exact frame that he's actually punching, okay? So that's why we're going to do it like this, and it will work a lot better and look a lot better. So anyway, just thought I'd show you that first. So let's go ahead and actually go into the script itself. So I've actually written out the whole script. I did actually make a tutorial before this, and I wrote out all of this code as I was making the tutorial. And then I had issues again with my sound. For some reason, it keeps turning off my microphone in OBS. Yeah, so I didn't want to write it all out again. So I've just left it here, and I'm just going to explain it because it took me a long time to write it out. Anyway, so I've made this script so that it's going to be really easy for you guys to understand. So basically when you put a header above a variable, it'll show up like this. As you can see, we've got game object that has first person controller script attached. So you know exactly what needs to go in there. And then we have headings for everything, okay? So this was the variable that we had for the last tutorial, and this is where we put the game object that has the first person controller attached. And then I've also made another header, and this is the position the raycast comes from. So this is our it's a private variable, but we made it serialized field so that we can actually see it in the inspector. So you'll see it shows up here, Raypoint. So this is where we actually want to drag our Raypoint that we just made, okay? This is where we're going to fire our raycast from. So back into the script. These are the variables we had from the last tutorial to actually manipulate the rotation and position of our arms. So I've actually just gone ahead and put them under this heading here. And then we have another heading, and this is for everything to do with our actual melee when we punch. So we've got a public float, and that is for the damage. So how much damage we want to do when we actually punch. And you can see all of these are adjustable in the actual inspector, okay? So you can change these how you want. We've also got the force. So the force we want to apply to an object that we hit that has a rigid body attached. I've got it set to 800. That's actually really high, but I just wanted to make sure that we had a lot of force so you could actually see it really playing out. Then we have our public float for the range. So how far we want to actually be able to punch something when we're standing away from it. So I've got that set to 3. You can adjust that higher or lower. And then this one here is quite important. This is the layer mask, and I called it the melee layer. So the reason why we've got a melee layer is because if we go back to our Raypoint and I just go to the side view here, you'll see that the ray is actually going to come from behind the arm. So when the ray fires, it's probably going to hit our player. Well, not probably, it is going to hit our player first. So we want to make sure that this ray only interacts with the layers that we want it to. So we can actually go ahead and we can change this so that we don't interact with anything we don't want to. So I can click this on default. So it's going to interact with default layers. And then we can go ahead and on our actual player, we can go to layer, we can go to add layer, and we can just make a new layer and call it player. And then if we go back to our player again, we've got to remember to actually assign it. So click on player and yes, change children. So now everything that is a child of this player game object is going to have the layer player. See? All player. So then we can actually go back to the script and you can see here that it's not selected. So that means that our Raycast isn't going to interact with our player. Okay? So now it'll just fire straight through until it hits something with the layer default. So keep that in mind. If you change the layer of a game object in your game, the Raycast isn't going to interact with it unless you actually make sure you select it from this list. Okay, so that's very important. And then of course we have our attack timer. I've just set that to 1. So how many seconds between each punch, because we're going to actually be able to hold our left mouse button down and it'll just punch every 1 second. So with our attack time, we've actually got the public float, which you can change in Inspector, and then we have a private variable attack timer as well. And you'll see why I use this one when we get a bit further into the script. Then we have the private string, and this is the tag name. So this string is actually just going to store the tag of anything that we punch, okay? So if we punch the enemy, then all this string is going to do is, instead of tag name, this is going to be enemy, and we're going to use this to actually work out what tag we're hitting, and then to do different things when we hit different game objects with a different tag name, okay? So that'll make sense when we get down to it. And then I've got the melee impact effects. So this is all the particle effects. So we've just got our default blood, stone, wood, water, and metal. And then we've got our audio section, and we've got 2 audio sources. So we've got one for our foley, which is just basically when we throw a punch and it's just like cloth moving. And the only audio clip that we're going to use with this audio source at the moment is the melee audio clip. And then we have another audio source, which is our impact sounds, okay? So this is going to handle all of the sounds made when we actually punch a game object. So we've got our default sound, blood impact, stone impact, wood impact, water impact, metal impact, one for each of our tagged game objects. And then we've just got an animation heading, and that is just going to have our animator in it. So if you go ahead and go back to the arms, you can actually fill all of this stuff out. So what I've actually done, if you just lock your inspector, you can go into your particle effects. Sorry, I couldn't even think of what they were called. Your particle effects, and then go to weapon effects and the prefabs, and you can drag the flesh one into the blood effect. You can drag the stone one, which is this one. I just have that as our default effect. And then for the stone, I've got the same one, stone. And for wood, I've got wood. And for water, I've got the water container effect. And then for metal, I've got the metal effect, okay? So these particle systems actually have a decal as well. So it's actually going to make a little mark and then the particle system comes out. So they're actually going to be quite good, especially when we do our shooting. It'll look a lot better than when we're just punching something and making these effects. So in our audio sources, this is very important. Make sure that you put one audio source. So just maybe start with the first one and drag that into the first audio source, and then make sure that you put the other audio source in the impact sound audio source, okay? Make sure you don't put the same audio source in both of these, okay? And then I've just gone ahead and with my audio, I've put the foley in the foley, and then I've just basically put different punch sounds in all of these to fill them out, okay? So I've got the same punch sound in a couple of them, but that doesn't matter. You guys spend some time, get some good, get some good sounds, okay? And then the animator, which is just here, you can just drag and drop the animator into this slot, or you can just drag the actual arms into this slot, and it does exactly the same thing because the arms have the animator component attached to them. We could actually just grab this, like get the component in start, but I'm just doing it like this for now, okay, just to make it really, really easy. So if you go back into our script, we can have a look, and our first function is the private void on enable. So this is a built-in Unity function, and this one is called, say, our arms. I'll just turn that off. Locked. Make sure you unlock your inspector up here. So just say our arms were inactive, okay? Like this little box isn't ticked, and then it became active all of a sudden, like we activate it during the game. Once that happens, this function here is called. So when we activate our arms, I'm going to play the equip. So that's when his arms come up from the down position, okay? And we set these animations up in the last tutorial, I believe. So that would be the actual equip one here. Pretty simple. So then we have our, well, first of all, let's have a look at our unarmed input. So this is going to be the input when we actually press a button, which is in this case is going to be our left mouse button, okay? So if we press the left mouse button or we hold the left mouse button down, then we're going to check if our attack timer, the private variable attack timer, is less or equal to 0. And it's always going to be less than 0 when we start the game, or it's going to be 0 when we start the game. So we're always going to be able to punch. As soon as the game starts, we don't have to wait. We can throw a punch straight away because our attack timer is just, it's basically just 0. We could just say equals 0, but it already equals 0, okay, because we haven't given it a value. So we're going to be able to throw our punch as soon as the game starts. We don't have to wait our 1 second. But then we're going to equal the private attack timer to equal the actual attack timer. And our attack timer is 1 second. So after we throw our first punch, this is going to be 1 second. And then the next time we want to throw a punch, we're going to have to wait 1 second before we do it. Or whatever we change this variable to right here, okay? And then once we have actually reset the timer, we're going to play our punch animation, and then we're actually going to make our Foley audio source dot clip equal the melee audio clip, okay? The reason we're doing it this way is because down here you can see I'm actually going to give it a random pitch just to mix it up a little bit and a random volume. So all this is going to do is if we open up our audio source, you'll see here that we actually have something called pitch, and we have obviously our volume. So we're just going to access both of these two variables there, and we're going to give them a random range. You can have it whatever you want, but just be careful. You don't want it too low or too high for pitch because it will sound quite funny. But this is just going to give it a tiny bit of randomization so that every time we throw a punch, it's not going to sound exactly the same, okay? Because that's just, it's a bit too generic if you just hear exactly the same sound over and over again. This is just going to mix it up a tiny bit so that it sounds slightly different each time. And then once we've actually got the random pitch and a random volume value, we can actually go ahead and just play the Foley audio source, okay? So then it's just going to play the melee audio clip. And then in our update function, all we're going to do is we're going to get our private attack timer variable, and we're going to minus equal that to time.delta time. So every frame we're going to count down using time.delta time. So regardless of what frame rate we're getting on the game, it's always going to be the same for everyone. So if I'm getting 120 frames on my computer and you're only getting 30 frames on your computer, it's always going to be exactly the same, okay? So that's why we use time.delta time. And then, of course, we have to call the unarmed input, which is this function that we just made. And also, I call the arm manipulation. And the arm manipulation is exactly what we did in the last tutorial. I've just put it all in here, okay? This was all just in the update function. And just to make it a lot neater, I've just made it into a function and then called the function. So now our update function is nice and clean. We have like 3 things in it, okay? And then we have this section down here called called through animation event. And I always do this when I'm going to call a function through an animation event because you don't want to get confused and have a function that you try to change and you wonder what's going on. It doesn't work when you change it because you haven't realized that you've actually called that one through an animation event. You're not actually calling it through this script, okay? So what we actually do is you can just do the pound and type region, and then you can just give it a heading that you want, in this case called through animation, and then you do a pound and end region, and you can just close it all up into this heading just like that, okay? So if we look at this one, this is a function, public, has to be public void melee attack. So this is where we're going to handle firing an actual raycast, and we're going to handle where the raycast actually comes from, what it can actually hit, how far it goes, and then what to do when it actually hits something, okay? So we've just made this variable here. It's a new ray, it's a ray, and then we're going to store this variable in a variable that we just call ray for simplicity. We're going to equal that to a new ray, and then what we have to actually do is give it an origin, a vector3 origin, which is where the ray is actually going to shoot from. In this case, we're going to shoot it from our Raypoint, which is the actual Raypoint up here, which is the actual Raypoint that we just made, okay? So that's where it's going to start off, the ray, and it's transform.position. And then we also have to give it a direction, a vector3 direction. So we want it to come from the ray point again, and then .transform.forward. So we just want to shoot it on the z-axis forward from our player, okay? That's all that's saying there. So that's our ray, and then we also make another variable. It's a raycast hit, and we're going to store it in the variable that we make called hit, and we'll just equal that to a new raycast hit. And then we need to check exactly what this ray, we need to check what the ray's hitting, and if it's actually hitting something for a start within the actual range, and then the layer, okay? So we make this check first. So we just say if physics.raycast, and then we need to put in the actual ray itself, which is what we made up here, the ray, and then we do the out hit. So this is actually going to store what we hit in this variable here. And then we need to give it a maximum distance. So our maximum distance is our melee range, which is set to 3. And then we need to, well, we don't have to, but we can give it a layer mask. So in our case, we've used the melee layer. So we're saying that we can't interact with anything except something that has a default layer, which is what we set up here. So we're only interacting with something that has a default layer. And then once we've made that check, the first thing we want to check is if we actually hit a rigid body. So if hit.rigid body, then we want to add force at the position that we actually hit, okay, with the Raycast. So in this case, the amount of force that we're going to add, we need a vector3.force, so our melee force, which we set to 800, and then we're just going to times that by the position. So we want that to be transform.forward, okay? Because we want to add, like say we punch something, we don't want it to come back towards us. We want it to move away from us when we actually hit it. And where we're going to actually add the force is at the hit.point, okay? Because remember, the hit stores the actual point that the ray hits, okay? So then we want to get our tag name variable, which is the one up here in melee, this string that we made, tag name. We want that to equal the hit.transform.tag. So the tag of the game object that we hit is going to be stored in this variable here, okay? And then we make a game object and just call it decal, and we're going to use this when we actually hit the different tags. So we make a switch statement, and I think we used this in the last tutorial series I did as well. I just like to do it like this. I find it very neat. So we use a switch statement and we add our tag name into the switch statement, and then our first case, which is this here, is if we actually hit something tagged as enemy. And obviously we're going to want to add damage to the enemy further into the tutorial series. So just for now, I've added in this just to let us know that we need to put the damage into here, but we don't have any damage at the moment to add, so we'll just leave that for now. And then we actually want to store in our decal game object up here, we want that to equal instantiate blood effect, because this is the enemy, and we want to instantiate it at the hit.point, so the point the Raycast actually hits. And then we use quaternion.from to rotation, okay? So it's got a from direction. So we have this to minus vector3.forward. So basically we use minus vector3.forward because, just say, let's just go to this one. Say we punch this here, we want minus vector3.forward, because if we just had vector3.forward, we punch this and the blood would come out this side, okay? And the decal would be, you wouldn't be able to see the actual decal that it makes. Whereas if we do minus vector3.forward, the decal will actually show up on this side of it and the blood will come out towards us. I think the particle effects have their own randomization, so they won't always come directly straight for you, which is quite good as well. So yeah, minus vector3.forward, and we want that to be at the hit.point again. So this is where the Raycast hits, and we want to instantiate it as an actual game object, okay? So if we instantiate it as an actual game object, then we can actually get that decal variable again, which is now the actual particle effect and the decal, and we're going to just say .transform.parent equals hit.transform. So basically all this is going to do is, if we have our effect examples here, our weapon effects, our prefabs, say I've got this particle effect, right? I've just punched this. It's instantiated the particle effect into our hierarchy. And say I punch the enemy one here. Once it instantiates this effect, it's actually going to make it a child of the enemy. Okay, just like that. It's going to automatically make it a child of the enemy. The enemy is going to become its parent. And this is quite useful because just say the enemy is moving or whatever object you're hitting is moving, the particle effect is going to stay on the actual enemy. It's not going to instantiate into thin air and then the enemy moves away from it and it looks a bit weird sometimes. So that's all that we're doing here, okay? Just making it a child of the actual thing that we hit. And then we're just going to play our impact sound by, well, first of all, we're going to equal our impact sound audio source to the actual blood impact audio clip, because that's the audio clip we want to play when we punch an enemy. And then we're just going to do the 2 randomizations again, and then we're going to say impact sounds audio source.play to actually play the clip once it's been randomized on the pitch and volume. And then you don't have to do this, but I'm just because I'm just going to equal the tag name to an empty string again, okay? So it's no longer going to be the enemy tag. That really doesn't matter, but I just put it in there anyway. And then of course you can go ahead and you can make another case for untagged, and that's going to be exactly the same, except you need to change blood effect to the default effect, and you need to change the clip to the default impact audio clip as well. And then just do the same for stone. Make sure you change that to stone, wood, change that to wood, and water and metal. So there you go. That is the script. I tried to make it really nice and neat for you guys so that you could understand it a bit better, and hopefully you guys like it. So anyway, what we need to do, we have this called through animation event, but we actually need to call it through an animation, of course. So if we go back to our animation, it's still in the position I had it. If yours isn't, just remember you can just select the clip from here, and we've got our unarmed, and then go to the point where he punches, and then we just click on this little add event. And because the script is actually, like the unarmed script is actually attached to the arms, we'll be able to find the function just up here, right there, okay? So melee attack, and then we're good to go. So when we punch, we're going to play the melee attack function on this frame right here. I'll just reset this back to how it was. I'll save the actual game, turn this back to project, and yeah, let's go and have a look and see what happens. I'll just double check actually that we've actually got everything. Okay, we should be good to go. So if I play the game, and this is untagged, like everything in here should be untagged. So if I just punch this, you'll see, get a bit closer, we actually play an effect and a sound. And then this is our actual one that we had as untagged. You'll see, punch it. I can just hold the finger on the left mouse button and punch every second. This one's our enemy. Okay. This one is stone. Does the same as for anything that's untagged. This is wood. This is our water barrel. Okay, water comes out, cool. This is metal. And this one is our rigid body. So we're adding quite a bit of force to him, so he should go flying. If I punch him, there you go. So it's knocked him flying and it played the effect as well. Okay, so if you want to set something like this up in your scene, as I said, I've just made these. These are all just cubes that I've messed with the scale of, and then I've just made materials for them. And you can make a material by just right clicking in your project, go to create and material, okay? And then in your materials, when you make them, you can change the actual color. You can change it, like this one is metal, so I've made it more metallic. You can make it really metallic like this. You can mess with the smoothness. You can change it from albedo or metallic alpha if you want. So yeah, and then you just drag your materials onto the game objects. So yeah guys, I hope you like this tutorial. Please remember, if you watch the videos, to like the videos. I really need you guys to make sure you hit the like button to try to help me grow my channel. Unfortunately, if people just keep watching my videos and don't like them, yeah, they don't really go well with YouTube's algorithm, and they don't get seen by many people, and then I don't really have much motivation to keep making videos. So please hit the like button, subscribe if you're not subscribed, even share the videos to other people that you think might enjoy them, that are trying to or trying to learn Unity. Yeah, that'd be much appreciated. Don't forget, you can also support me on Patreon. For $1 a month you can get the scripts for the tutorials, and for $3 a month you can download the entire projects, okay? Alright guys, thanks for watching, and I will see you all soon. Cheers.